I want to welcome everyone to the third annual Long List Party for the Republic of Consciousness Prize for the United States and Canada. My name is Lori Feathers. I am the founder of the prize and the chair. And I want to give a special welcome to the 10 publishers who we are honoring here tonight for their contributions to literature. And they've also have with them, in some cases, their authors, and where applicable, the translators. So welcome everyone. We really appreciate your time and sincere apologies that the time zone is pretty nasty for some people. I wanted to just, I guess, start out with the briefest of introductions about the prize itself. Some of you know this, but maybe others do not. This prize is an extension of the Republic of Consciousness Prize in the United Kingdom, and that was formed in 2016 by Neil Griffiths, a writer there. And it was his vision to honor indie publishers. And in Neil's words, I'll quote, the reason that he founded the UK Prize in 2016 was that the big five can afford to publish risk-taking books because they have best-selling authors to underwrite the loss. But they have almost completely ceased to do so, meaning that publishers, like those of you here tonight, who can least afford to take the financial risk, are left to publish the most risk-taking work, a deep irony that needed some kind of recognition and action. So we're all here to take action tonight. Um, in 2021, I started discussions with Neil about bringing the prize over here. And although the prizes are not identical in the way that the submissions work, I'm proud to say that we're an extension of that UK prize. And although we're only in our third year here in North America, I'm also proud to say that we are truly growing stronger every year with more indie presses submitting, greater publicity, and of course, excellent books like those we'll be discussing tonight. I want to just mention briefly as well that the prize is run 100% by donations from the public. We receive zero money from the private sector, public institutions, or, God forbid, government institutions. Um, if you're interested in donating, and I encourage you to do so, please go to the donate page on our website. You may know from our website that each of the publishers on tonight's long list will receive $2,000 in prize winnings. The five publishers that go on to make it to the short list will receive an additional $3,000 to be split evenly among the publisher, author, and if applicable, the translator. The winner of the prize receives no further money, but is encouraged to bask in the glory of being just the winner and affix our special stickers on the books that you send out to the bookshops. The short list will be announced on February 27th, the winner on March 12th. And now it's my big honor to introduce our judges for the 2024 prize. We've got Rebecca Rhine with us. Yeah, thanks for waving. Of Walmart Watermarks Books and Cafe in Wichita, Kansas. Dorian Stuber, there's Dorian, of the One Bright Book podcast. We've got Luis Alberto Correa of White Whale Bookstore in Pittsburgh. Hi. James Crossley of Leviathan Bookstore in St. Louis. Chris Villa of the YouTube channel Leaf by Leaf. And me, Lori Feathers of Interrobang Books in Dallas, Texas. Okay, for tonight's program, we will have each of our judges introduce a long-listed publisher and their submission, followed by a 2-minute reading from the book and 2 questions from the judge. To get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Dorian Stuber, who will introduce And Other Stories.
Thanks, Lori. Hi, everyone. So nice to see everyone here, and I'm really honored to be on on the panel of judges and to do this work, and also to speak with two writers tonight, the first of which is Manya Wilkinson, whose book Lublin is here. You probably can't tell, but it does have a chunk out of it because my dog, with very good taste, ate some of this book. That didn't stop me from reading it all, though. Lublin is published by And Other Stories, and Stefan Tobler is here as well from the press, and we're really happy to have both of you here. So, yeah, moving on to the reading. Anya, I assume that you might be doing that, but I don't know how you all worked it out.
Yeah.
So, we'd love to hear a snippet from the book, and then, yeah, I definitely have some questions.
Okay. So, right. So just to give you a little context, the year is 1907, and three 14-year-old lads, Ilya, Kiva, and Ziv, are walking from their home in Mizrich, which is a mostly Jewish town in southeast of Warsaw, to Lublin. It's about 100 kilometers away, 63 miles, with a suitcase full of brushes to sell. So three friends on the road selling brushes. What could possibly go wrong? Right. There's a mill in Mizrich belonging to Kiva's father, a brickyard, a cigarette factory, a rope twisting factory, an eau de cologne factory, a soap factory, shuls, naturally, where fathers pray for the success of their sons, a tannery, and many brush and bristle factories known far and wide. Mizrich, as Elia would tell you, is the brush and bristle capital of the world. The very air, when the wind comes from the right direction, smells like hair. The surrounding land belongs to the Polish Count Pataki, the family coat of arms, a yellow cross with three branches, one broken, is rumored to signify shameful apostasy. Years ago, a Pataki was cut off when he became, you should excuse the expression, a Jew, and took the name Abraham, which is hard to believe. A Russian church is the tallest building in town, but don't look up. The shadow of its spire and cross might fall on you. And then what? Dropsy, blindness, bad knees. The sun is now high in the sky, and Kiva takes out his father's watch. His mother begged him to leave such a valuable item at home, but where would they be without it? Only 12:05, excellent time, but as the day advances, the road grows longer, and Kiva wonders when they'll be catching a carriage. He would like to stop and rest, but Ilya urges him on. Soon you'll be resting on a feather-filled Lublin love seat, says Ilya, or on any of the vast and comfortable armchairs in the town. Lublin is only 102 kilometers south of Mizrich. At an average walking pace of 6 kilometers an hour, walking for 8 hours every day, Elia determines they will arrive in 2, maybe 3 days. In Lublin, there are great Jewish marketplaces, Jewish squares, fountains, theaters, stone-built synagogues, renowned yeshivas, statues of Polish heroes who are admittedly not Jewish, and statues of frowning lions who look Jewish with their expressions of finicky distaste, as if offered a pork ball. or a crustacean to eat. Gazing past distant fields of a lilac hue, Ilya imagines Lublin just over the horizon, waiting to be discovered. Lublin, where all the fortunate inhabitants carry full purses, where the salt is saltier, the water wetter, the streets more than 6 cobbles wide. It's only a matter of time before Ilya and his friends arrive. Thanks.
Great. Yay. Thank you so much, Manya. That really gives a great flavor of the book. For, and if you haven't read it yet, you really need to do that. The first thing I wanted to ask is kind of a question for both of you, and Stefan, and it's about the use of Yiddish in the text. It seems to me that you chose not to inflect your English with kind of Yiddish syntax, like the way, say, Bernard Malamud might have done or something. And you can disagree with me if you think differently, but instead to include Yiddish like directly in the text. And so I guess what I want to know is what that allowed you to do. And Stefan, from the publisher side, like just what were your feelings about doing that? Like, did that stress you out a little? Like, there's no glossary or anything like that, right? So kind of question sort of from the author perspective and then from the publisher perspective.
Okay, well, I didn't want to have a glossary. I felt that the Yiddish was understandable from the context. And I wanted a lot of Yiddish. Yiddish is my first language, my childhood language, and a wonderful, rich, juicy language. And I was just hoping that whoever read the book might pick up one or two Yiddish expressions and use them in their daily life. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything more to add to that. I agree. I mean, I think it's it's quite brave in the amount of Yiddish we get. I'm thinking, but comparing to other books that have some
Yeah.
of another language, but at the
Yeah, I
same
think
time,
so
it's
too. That's why I was curious whether that was like a consideration for you in any way or not.
yeah. I agree with I agree. I think that it's that it all is in the context understandable. You see what the joke's about.
Yeah.
You see yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
I,
feel like that. Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's
No, I mean, it was going to be me a segue into the second question too, because you just mentioned the jokes, and that's one of the real joys of the book. Ilya is inveterate joke teller, and a lot of these jokes are real classics, and they're wonderful, and but some of his jokes don't always land for him, and he's kind of stressed out about that. And I'm thinking about an early moment in the like I think it's the second joke that he tells, and he's like, he knows that the punchline hasn't quite worked out, and he's like and he's trying a bunch of different variations to see if he can get it to land. And I was thinking about that idea of landing the punchline, of landing something. And I was wondering about like how you, Manya, in terms of creating this book, how you thought about, because it's such a shaggy dog story, how you thought about landing different moments in the book and how you thought about the ending of the book, like your punchline, I guess, as it were. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know how to answer that question though. The ending, uh, yeah, it ends in an open way, I think, which I did predetermined,
Mm,
which I won't reveal. Uh, so yes, and the jokes. Um, the jokes are like laughing with tears in your eyes.
yeah,
So,
totally.
yeah, they don't always land or they land strangely. So that, that was, and that's survivor's humor, is it not?
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
I have plenty of other questions, but I have to stop now. Lori gets mad at me otherwise. So I forgot who I'm supposed to turn it over to, Lori.
Next,
Sorry.
it's okay. I can do that.
Okay, cool.
Next up is Fern Books, and Lewis is gonna introduce that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for coming. It was such a joy to judge this award. I have to apologize if I seem a little down. I'm battling COVID and currently working through some Dayquil. But it brings me great joy to introduce Fern Books for Like a Sky Inside by Jakuta Alikavazovic. And we're joined today by Daniel Levin Becker and also Christina Kearns. So, if we could hear a little bit of a reading from Like a Sky Inside, I'd really enjoy that.
Hi, everybody. It's just me, Daniel. Christina sends her regrets. And it is 1:15 in the morning here, so it's not COVID, but you will also forgive our lapses into incoherence. Fortunately, we have a book that tells us what to say. And so I'm just going to give a quick reading. This is a book about the author spending a night inside the Louvre and reflecting on how she used to go there growing up in Paris, how she used to visit the Louvre all the time with her father, who was an immigrant from what was then Yugoslavia. And she's just sort of in the middle of a reflection, setting the context and remembering her father, his relationship to the museum as she was growing up. He did everything at the Louvre, even brush my teeth, he confided to me once, which struck me as insane, and which I'm nonetheless going to do in a few hours. He read books there. He circled the words he didn't know. Over the years, he had to sell, then buy back some of his possessions. Never the books, to which he stayed loyal, books whose paper is now dry, yellow, brittle like tobacco. Books that have no worth but the immaterial value of his annotations, which must in fact only depreciate them further, making them of interest to me alone. He circled the words he didn't know. There aren't all that many ways to learn a language, and I would do the same in the 90s with English. You can still follow today, from book to book, the evolution of his vocabulary. He read biographies of Leonardo da Vinci. He read Paul Klee's On Modern Art. And even if fiction, the novel, was never his preference, he read Night Rounds by Patrick Modiano. He forged a refined French for himself and took meticulous care of it. In a way, I suppose it was like wearing a handsome coat. So, despite his accent, he spoke like a book, like the books I would later write. Or rather, it's I who write the way he spoke, the way I believed he spoke. In my first published piece, I used the word charron, an obscure shade of blue, and the editor wanted to change it. It's not that it doesn't exist, but nobody will understand it, she told me. And because I was young, because I was shy, and sensible too, and ambitious, I acquiesced. She was wrong, though. My father would have understood. But would my father really have understood? One day, at his apartment, I flipped through his copy of my first novel. A novel he loves, that he insisted I dedicate to him, which surprised me because it's a book about a bad father, a dimension he never commented on, perhaps never even noticed. He liked its language, its images. Or maybe he liked the idea of it. Yes, maybe he liked the idea of that book, the idea of his novelist daughter. When I think of that preschool teacher who told me, "This little girl will never speak French," he would recall with pride. With bitterness, too, a 25-year-old bitterness that still held him in its sway as though she had said it yesterday. "This little girl will never speak French," he would repeat, and caress the cover of the novel as one puts balm on a burn. For a long time, I have to admit, I wondered whether he'd read the book. Of course he'd read it. Of course. Here are some of the words he circled. Lévitative, lézardé, fruitarien. I never used them again.
Thank you, Daniel. Really appreciate you reading and joining us tonight. I guess one thing I wanted to ask about were some of the challenges you must have encountered while translating this book. Alikavazovic is also a translator herself, too, as well as an accomplished writer. So I wonder if that played into how you approach this book as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice challenge to have to translate somebody whose English is so good. Jakuta is a badass translator from English into French. She's translated some essays by David Foster Wallace. She's translated Milkman by Anna Burns. She just retranslated Beloved by Toni Morrison. So there's not a lot that she can't do. And that could have turned out much worse for me to be hanging out in a Google Doc with her and her saying, that's not really the way I see this. But for the most part, we were on the same page, and most of the things that she said, I don't really see it like that. I came around to her way of thinking. The passage I read, in fact, was one of the few places where we never quite came to an agreement, which was the question of whether to leave those three words that she talks about using that her father circled, whether to translate them into English or to leave them in French. That was something that we never quite resolved. But as you have just heard, they stayed in French. Um, but she was really a joy to work with. And the challenges are much more just sort of doing justice to a voice that's really elegant and both impassioned and detached at the same time without I guess falling prey to some of the more structural excesses of French.
Another thing I wanted to ask, I don't know if in your collaboration you may have gathered any indication of what it may have been, but I don't think it's a big spoiler to indicate that she gives a hint that she may have left something at the Louvre when after her night that she spends there. Do you have any thoughts on what that could have been? Any pet theories? Because we've all been wondering.
So, just to give a little of context for that, there's this sort of refrain in the book where she's remembering visiting the Louvre with her father, and every time at the end of every visit, he would take her aside and say, "So, how would you go about stealing the Mona Lisa?" And this is wonderful thought experiment that, she thinks about that kind of shaped her as a child and turned her into the novelist that she is in many ways. And toward the end of the book, toward the end of her night in the Louvre, she says, I've come here to transgress in a way, but I'm not going to steal something from this space. I'm going to add something to this space. I have no idea what it is. I have no pet theories. I will say that Jakuta has apparently received volumes and volumes of mail from people who are just absolutely convinced they know what she's left.
Well, that's great. We'll keep theorizing ourselves. Well,
Yeah,
that's
you
all
can you
that's
can feel free to send additional hypotheses via Fern.
right. My theory is that in the end, it is this treasure of a book. So that's
Mm.
where I stand on that. Uh, so that's all the time we have for Like a Sky Inside, and it gives me great pleasure to give things over to Chris.
Thanks, Lise. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thank you so much. This is Chris, and I have the pleasure of first introducing Overstaying by Ariane Koch. And this is from Dorothy, a publishing project. And I know many people who get very giddy about anything that has Dorothy, a publishing project on it. So we also have Martin Riker and Daniel Dutton of Dorothy here on the call with us. So perhaps we'll start off just like the previous two with a short reading from Overstaying.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. From Berlin, also like 1 a.m. or like, yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna read a little piece of Overstaying for the first time ever in English for me. So I feel like in school. In the place where the visitor came from, he no longer is. In the place where he was, there is now only a non-him. In the place where the visitor no longer is, someone is dealing with a gap, an empty space, possibly a pulsating empty space. Someone finds him or herself confronted with the visitor's absence. Someone is possibly baffled, possibly sad, possibly happy about it. Everything the visitor might be too much of here, he is perhaps too little of somewhere else. Here there was nothing missing. Here no one was waiting for a visitor. Here there's everything to access already. Only the Rondel bar is gradually falling apart. The golden kerchiefs tacked to the walls are increasingly coming loose. The people drinking along the ring of the bar, too, are getting wrinkles, first in the corners of their eyes, then in the corners of their mouth. Sooner or later, their jaws will be hanging down into their beer foam. The Roundel bar is turning more and more into a museum housing fossils. Sometimes I imagine wall text, glass cases, basins to put the fossils into. The artist with the walrus moustache, a woman with very long hair and a busy-looking face who likes to wear a dress that looks like fish scales. Another woman with shorter hair, whose drink sometimes slips spectacularly out of her hands. Yes, even these fossils need a home. The fact is, all my life I've longed to go away, but then I've never left. The fact is, I've been thinking about leaving and talking about leaving my whole life long, but I'm still here. I'm the oldest fossil of all, and I hate this small town so much that I'll have my revenge on it by never actually leaving, even if I constantly act like I'm about to. I'm the oldest fossil of all, and even if someone asked me on bended knee to leave here, I would stay anyway. Maybe the only one who has understood the difference between possibilities and actualities is the visitor. Maybe he never actually wanted to go anywhere at all. Maybe he just wanted to stay where he was all his life. But he has nevertheless managed to privilege the unavoidable over the unwanted. I thought I should tell the visitor that he should be proud of himself for having understood something that a small town full of fossils is never, not for a single second, capable of understanding, not even when rooms are pressing down onto their skulls. I thought I might tell the visitor about my possible departure so that he could prognosticate its feasibility, or maybe I hoped that if I got closer to the visitor, a little of his having left would spill over onto me and flush me out of town like a giant wave. In short, I needed an expert. Sometimes I think I shouldn't talk about leaving anymore because I've already talked about it too much. Not a day goes by that I don't talk about leaving. I never get tired of talking about it. I wonder if the only way it's possible to stay somewhere is if you constantly talk about leaving. Since someone who only talks about staying has really, on the inside, long since left already, right? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariane. I hope you feel like translator Damion Searls did a good job.
Yeah, he did. He did.
I forgot to mention that Damion Searls was the translator there before we went in. Yeah, so Overstaying, I feel like it just brilliantly examines the idea of home by contrasting a character who has a house but not a home against another character who appears to have a home but not a house. So I wonder, from the perspective of your book, what is a home? Is a home simply wherever we find ourselves? Is it the place we wish we didn't have to leave? Is it the place we refuse to leave, even if it burns down around us? Or are we all just transient visitors forever in search of this idea we call home?
Oh, that's a very huge question.
Is it too much for 1 a.m?
Yeah, maybe it is, but it's very interesting. It's actually a very nice question. And yeah, I never got asked. So yeah, I think home is the familiar, maybe. But I don't know if it's the same in English as in German, because like Heimat is also like yeah, it has also like this nationalist kind of thing in it. So I don't know. I for me it's very like difficult to talk about Heimat, like the German Heimat, like the German home, and like without like talking about like politics and how like kind of home is occupied, like like by these metaphors. I don't know, but that's not very good answer, but that's what came to my mind now.
No, it's great, and I would love to dig into more of that word, but like Dorian said, Lori gets really mad at us if we take too much time. So, my second question about overstaying is for, I believe, maybe Danielle. I was really curious. I think that the cover art by Lucy Kohler, the Sur la plage abandonnée, is, I mean, I think it's perfect. It's a great compliment to the book, but I just wondered, in your words, why that cover design in particular.
Well, actually, I think Ariana might be able to give the best answer to this question too. So I'll pass it.
Yeah, I mean, as you see, I think Danielle and Martin asked me if I want to like make like a suggestion for the book cover. And Lucy Kohler is a friend of mine. She's a painter, a Swiss painter. And then I saw this painting, and then I thought that could fit. That's like the best.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I've since followed her on Instagram and been stalking all of the posts of her paintings on there. So yeah, really great choice and a fantastic book. Thank you so much for putting it out there for us to be able to read.
Thank you.
And with that, I will pass it on to Rebecca.
Yeah, I'm so pleased to be presenting this evening Gifted by author Suzumi Suzuki, translated from the Japanese by Allison Markin Powell, who joins us this evening. The book is published by Transit, and we're also joined by Transit publishers Adam Levy and Ashley Levy. And I invite somebody from the team to read a passage.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm Allison. I'm the translator. And so I was just going to read from the beginning, so there's not really a lot of context needed. But I guess what I'll say is that this is an intimate mother-daughter story. So I go around at the back of the building that faces the road separating Koreatown and the entertainment district, push open the heavy door at the rear of the car park, and ascend the interior staircase. On the third floor, I heave my weight against another heavy door that leads to a hallway, and once it opens wide enough, there is always a metallic creak. While that door slowly closes, I put the key in the lock for the door to my own apartment, turn it to the left, and hear a click as the latch releases. These are the two sounds I hear every night when I come home. If the interval between the creaking of the hinges and the turning of the pins in the old lock cylinder is too long or too short, there will be no sense of security. If I'm carrying something heavy and have to set it on the floor, or if I carelessly drop my keys, the rhythm breaks.
Thank you, Allison. As the translator of this book, the novel is written in such sparse prose. We get these snippets of memories and brief glimpses into daily routine, and yet throughout a brief 100 pages, we are invited into this world of the mother and the daughter and the past trauma and the complicated relationship, but also the devotion and caretaking. How can you speak to us about the translation process of we still get all of these emotions and feelings with the very sparse prose? So how particular were you selecting your words as translating?
Well, So this is a debut novel. This is her first, it's the first time I'm working with this author. But I tend to try to stay very close to language. I try to stay like very close on a language level, especially when the style is like this, because I do feel like, the sparseness is important. And so I'm going to invite Lizzie Davis, who was my editor here, since I know she's here tonight, to also chime in, because yeah, it's always a challenge to sort of find that voice and to sort of maintain it. It's important for me to think about which, as a translator, you think about it's constantly making choices. And I'm trying not to like eliminate possible interpretations for the reader.
Oh, I love that conceptualization of translation, Allison. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's nice to see you. And thank you for the introduction, Rebecca. Also, I think I would just add that there's so much in this book that comes from the repetition of sounds or the kind of groundedness that the narrator is finding in these sensory details in her surroundings as she is navigating this very ungrounded period in her life. And so just even in that first passage that Allison read, I think you have her going up the stairs, the sound of the stairs, the sound of the door, the metallic click of the key. And I think all of those sensory details, what she chooses to fixate on in different moments, really those give us a sense of her inner landscape as well. So I think that was something that I found very engaging and compelling about this novel and about Allison's gorgeous translation. I don't know if that answers the question of a translation challenge, but it is something I really admire about the text.
Well, thank you both. And one of the things we were speaking about as judges about this particular book right now, cozy novels from Japan filled with magical realism and often cats are so popular right now. And Gifted is basically the exact opposite of those. So for the publishers, Adam and Ashley, are you able to talk about the importance of introducing American readers to novels like this one and your mission of publishing in general as well?
Well, if only Adam and Ashley were here to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. There was a last minute change, so you're stuck with me and Lizzie Davis, the very eloquent Lizzie Davis. So I mean, this is funny because we had an event for the book a couple months ago, and this came up as well, and the conversation partner was actually the translator of I Can Prescribe You a Cat. And I mean, I think it's very important. There's always going to be what's in vogue, but I mean, this is just such a very particular and distinct corner of of Japanese society, and I mean and society in general. And it's a pretty unflinching look at it, and it's all captured so well in Allison's translation. And I think that just lends a real immediacy to it. But it is, yeah, you're right. It is not comfy, cozy, or it is like the super punked out version of that. I don't know if Lizzie or Allison has anything to add.
Well, you'll all be pleased to hear that this afternoon at the bookstore, I had somebody who was a big fan of We'll Prescribe You a Cat. And I was like, you probably like this Kawagama Food Detectives too. But then might I also tell you about Gifted? And he was all in. He bought both. So
good on you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Well, thank you
Appreciate
guys for joining us. And now I'll turn it over to James.
Hi, everybody. It is my privilege to introduce you to Your Absence is Darkness by Jan Kalman Stephenson, translated by Philip Roten from Biblioasis. And we have the author here, who I think can give us a brief excerpt from the book.
We're going to do something a bit different. John Kelman thought he would give you a taste in Icelandic, and then I'll read the English. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I will read very short in Icelandic, so you will hear the sound of the language. Is the language that they speak in heaven. So if you are lucky to go there, and then you know the sound. Maybe I will tell you later which language is spoken in hell. But now I start. Það sem skiptir máli og hefur varanlega áhrif á þig, djúpar tilfinningar, erfið reynsla, áföll, áköf hamingja, þrautir eða ofsi sem höggva í samfélagið eða veröldtína, getur farið svo djúpt inn í þig að það þrýstist inn í genin sem bera það síðan áfram á milli kynslóða og móta þannig þá sem enn eru ófættir. Það lögmálið. Bera hughrif, minningar, reynslu og áföll áfram frá lífi til lífs og í þeim skilningi eru sum okkar til löngu eftir að við erum horfin jafnvel að fullu gleymd. Fortíðin því ævilega innra með okkur. Hún ósýnilega dularfull af meginlandið sem þú finnur stundum fyrir í svefnrofunum. Meginland með fjöllum og höfum sem hafa stöðug áhrif á veðrin og birtubyrgðin innra með þér. Over to you, Dan.
Okay. What matters and has a lasting effect on you. Deep feelings, difficult experiences, trauma, intense happiness, hardship or violence that cuts into your community or world can work its way so deeply into you that it's pressed into the genes, which then carry it from generation to generation, thus shaping those yet to be born. It's a law of nature. Impressions, memories, experiences, and setbacks are passed on from life to life, and in that sense, some of us exist long after we're gone and are even completely forgotten. So the past is always with us. It's the invisible, mysterious continent that you sometimes feel when you're half awake, a continent with mountains and seas that constantly influence the weather and the shades of light within you. Some comfort can always be found. Maybe I dreamt this, that I'm sitting in the front pew in a cold church in the countryside, the deep stillness outside broken by the occasional bleat of a sheep and the distant screeching of Arctic terns. Windows frame the blue sky, the sea, the edge of a green hayfield, a nearly barren mountain. I hope that this is a dream because I don't remember myself, don't even know who I am or how I got here, don't know. But I am not alone in the church. Just now I looked over my shoulder to see a man sitting at the far end of the rear pew, close against a weathered flagpole lying across the backs of the 5 pews. Slim, probably middle-aged, with a thin, sharp-featured face, a receding hairline, and prominent lines on his forehead, and staring mockingly at me. Maybe I'm just dead. To think that this is how it happens. Everything goes out, self-consciousness is erased, and then you're restarted in a small church, and the devil is sitting a few pews behind you, come to claim your soul. That's where I'll stop.
Very nice. I think my favorite thing about this book, and there were many things I liked about it, was that it gave me the same feeling that the main character finds himself in. There's, it's very concrete setting, details of place. I felt I was, immersed in a real location, and yet I didn't know quite where I was or why I was there. Which is, in some books that do that, it's very explicitly confusing and chaotic, and this was the opposite of that. These settings, you're like, oh, this is very, very normal, and yet there's something I'm not grasping. It's always just out of reach as I go through this book. And I wondered, was that the way you felt your way through the writing of the book, Jan? Or was this an effect you thought, this is something I want to achieve, and planned for that all along?
Well, I never plan when I'm writing. I just write, and Uh, so, but when I started to write this book, I didn't know what will happen, but firstly, I wanted to, write about a man who has no memory and who don't know who he is. And so when we step out of the church, we are stepping out, well, not from a death, but from some unknown place and into the world. So we are being born. And everything, for me, everything was new. Everything was unexpected. And well, I have a fjord in my mind while I was writing the book. But as always, when I'm writing, the things or the landscape I have in my mind, they start to change, because writing changes everything that I think, and they change how I see the world. So when I'm writing a book, I know where I'm heading, but at the same time, I have no idea.
I get it. My next question, I guess, is really for Dan. This is the first book that you've done of Jan's, but it's not the last. I think you've got a whole program of the language of heaven you'll be publishing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I expect I will bring everything over to North America as I can. But a couple of weeks ago, we launched the first book in what I think must be considered his classic trilogy that we're just calling the trilogy about the boy, Heaven and Hell. And we'll be publishing the next two, because we've got a lot to catch up on, each successive season. And I think that this is as great an introduction to the world Jan Kalman builds as anything can be. But then, we have his new books too. So there'll be Yellow Submarine in 2027, and Lord knows what comes thereafter. But yeah, we're very committed to I mean, his work. I kind of think I read, much like you do, James or Laurie, really with the soul or the eyes of a bookseller. And my response to this book was as real as anything I've had in many years. So I just want to share it with all of you, and I thank the jury for allowing us to do this with this nomination.
Well, I did love this book, and I look forward to many more. I am going to kick things over to Chris.
May I add just one thing?
Sure.
Thanks to the great Philip Roten, my translator. He's marvelous. He's genius.
Yes.
All right, so I'm kind of taken aback here. I didn't realize it was going to come back to me so quickly. I'm just absorbed in everything everybody's saying. Yeah, I get to talk about Tidal Lock by Lindsay Hill. This is from McPherson. We have Bruce McPherson and Lindsay Hill on here. So we'll kick it off with a brief reading. If that's prepared, either by Lindsay or Bruce.
Hi. Yeah, I'll read a bit.
Great.
So the book is divided into 265 individually titled micro chapters. So I'll read briefly from 3 of those. My name is sometimes Olana. I like to draw things and steal things and go into buildings slated for demolition. Things on the map I stole are not where I used to think they were. Things are like that a lot, I've noticed lately. Dead horse. I've heard you can beat a dead horse, but you can't make it drink. Like that time I told my neighbor about the treasure map I'd found with the X in the middle of their basement floor. And if they didn't mind, could I just poke around down there a bit? No jackhammers or anything like that. Just see if there was some evidence to be found. And they showed their gratitude by calling my parents and saying I had a problem that should be looked at by a professional. And that was the first time I'd heard about people who make a life of looking into problems people are having. And I wondered if someday I might be a person like that, but I wasn't. Cats that disappear are usually close by, I read somewhere. But something switched in them, switched off or on, and now you're a predator, they think. So you can call them, but they won't come out. Other things are like that too. If you get a map of your neighborhood or draw one yourself, and then make a circle X feet from your house, your cat is inside that circle, they say. But you won't find your cat, I think, because you have completely forgotten how to look among all the things like shrubs and shadows and stairways you're used to not looking at, really. I don't have a cat. I stole a map of the West because my father disappeared and I wanted to draw a circle to find him in, but what's the scale? What's the conversion rate between cats and people? I don't think anyone knows exactly. This is from Under the Ice. You don't come from other people, really, you may have noticed. I don't mean your body doesn't come from other bodies. I mean you find a myth, a fairy tale, like a hermit crab finds an empty shell on the shore to crawl inside and live in. You come from the thorny wood, the house at the edge of the thorny wood. You come from the castle. You come from the peasant village at the edge of the sea of foreboding, or the city beneath the peak of impending fire. The queen is kind or ruthless. A savior arrives or not to steal you from the tower in which you are trapped. You make your way with little light from a twisted house or toward one. You go where you should not go because you must. You pay the price or you get away. You learn and forget or learn and remember. Desire scrawls its hurried name in passing, a path that shifts and jars like a child's cursive. A name not quite your own, but the best that you can write. You do not come from others. You come from this. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. It was a pleasure to read, but perhaps even more listening to you read it. One thing I noticed about Tidal Lock is on one level, it sort of operates like a lipogram in that you seem to conspicuously suppress all punctuation except for the M dash, the period, and the question mark. By comparison, in your previous book or your previous novel, Sea of Hooks, you did allow commas. Perhaps those commas constitute a sea of hooks, as it were. So with Tidal Lock, why exactly choose to push the punctuational suppression even further?
Well, I think it's, I guess it sounds, I don't know, a bit self-abstracted, but the voice did not want to pause. The voice never wants to pause. There are a lot of run-on sentences, and when she does pause, the M dashes are really just where she takes a breath. It's kind of like this voice is just pushing and pushing and pushing. So the idea that a comma would be admitted into her self sense of her speech just seemed out of place.
Sometimes Olana does not pause very often. One of my favorite notions from Tidal Lock is the idea of midnight as a second language. And this is the language Olana has to learn to speak in order to be with her missing father. I like how I immediately feel that impact of recognition and revelation without being able to really articulate what midnight as a second language really is or means. In the book, it's partially defined as the built and the imagined, shunted together in the switchyards of desire. I wonder, is Tidal Lock written in this language of midnight?
Well, it's a multi within English, and I don't want to sound presumptuous, but it's a multi-language project because sometimes Olana is very actually centered in the world of the city where she finds herself, but at other times she's adrift in the imagination. Her father was, I don't think it's a spoiler, was a sort of a embellisher and a fabulist. And she has to learn that language of midnight, that language of night, where things are poorly defined and shapes emerge and recede without well-defined boundaries. So for sure, the book, in her voice, speaks both languages. It speaks midnight as a second language, but it also speaks the language of the concrete world within which she finds herself.
Midnight and noon.
Exactly, yes. Dayquil and NyQuil.
Excellent work. Thank you so much. With that, I cannot remember at all who I'm supposed to hand it to yet again, so I depend on Lori.
It's Luis, and we're going to Sandorf Passage.
Yes, and featuring my bottle of Dayquil right here. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Sandorf Passage's The Case of Zem by Vera Mutafchieva and translated by Angela Rodel. And tonight we're joined by Sandorf Passage's Buzz Poole. So if we could kick it off with a reading.
Sure. Angela Rodel sends her regards from Bulgaria, where now I believe it's almost 3 a.m. there. So I am going to read a brief section from a part in the book that helped inspire the cover design. And it's something that Angela liked to read when she was on tour here last year in support of the book. So I thought it only appropriate. December 3rd, 1487. There is no God but Allah. Every morning, as soon as I start to stir in my bed, my parrot greets me with our creed. There is no God but Allah, I reply to the only creature in France that speaks my language and believes in my God. I would have been foolish to let it starve. Jem's companion is even better than mine. I often see them sitting in front of the chessboard. They move pawns, knights, and rooks with almost the same skill. They behave in almost the same way. From time to time, one of them gets up, paces around the room with the same meaningless movements before returning to the game. It's funny. The animal is supposedly doing everything its owner does, supposedly imitating him completely. Yet in the monkey, I see something more human, most likely a striving toward humanness, while Jem is still struggling to destroy his humanity. With every passing day, his behavior grows more immoderate, with no concern for rules or decorum, as if he is satisfied by the fact he is degenerating and losing the qualities that once made him a brilliant man, an idol to the intellectuals and armies of an entire empire. Yes, in fact, this is very likely Jem's true essence, Jem, whom I always considered an actor equally good in every role. But on the most fundamental spiritual level, he is an extremely spoiled child. Jem was handsome and charming, talented, magnanimous, generous, attractive, and inspiring. When that brought him some kind of satisfaction. The 6 years during which he fought against the encroaching despair were also easy years. Everything and everyone fed Jem with hopes.
and so Jem did not turn his back on his good qualities, since he believed they would soon dazzle the crowds again. But the first moment when Jem needed to fight to preserve his personality, now only for his own sake and not as a means but as an end, he let it fall to ruin. And in that ruination, he found some perverse delight, the delight of torturing someone who either loves you or needs you. I am the former, I who saw a deity in Jem. How could I not be tormented by the fall of my idol? How could I not risk everything to save him? The latter is the world as a whole. What harsher revenge against de Busan or innocent than the destruction of their precious bargaining chip? This is likely what Jem is thinking, to the extent he's still thinking at all. Yet my friend's calculations are fundamentally off. He cannot scare his jailers with his spiritual self-destruction, nor can he exact revenge in this way, not as long as he is physically alive. But perhaps he can at least get his revenge on me, so long as he stubbornly presents me with the broken image of my former idol. This is a good question, but why on earth does everyone overestimate the love another has for him? Why do we overestimate its durability and inviolability? It's true, I once loved Jem above all else. I would swear this even with my dying breath. But I loved the Jem whom I carried in my imagination, and only insofar as the living Jem did not wage war against the image I had created. When the tasks of our daily life hindered me from belonging entirely to my imagination, I came down to earth and collided there with the non-imaginary Jem. Then there was no room for self-delusion. Jem, the man, now inspired pity. The pity tempted me and flattered my ego. When you pity, you are better, stronger, more active. You can help. Yet how long can such a feeling last? Pity, I mean. I still don't know the answer. For the time being, my pity, my service, and my help are compulsory. I am also a prisoner.
Thank you so much. So I figured I'd start this line of questioning chronologically. So in 1481, just kidding. So tell us a bit about Vera Mutafchieva and how does the case of Jem fit in with the whole body of her work?
Vera Mutafchieva was the preeminent Ottoman historian in Bulgaria in the last part of the 20th century, and she was a very serious academic historian. But then with Jem, she started writing historical fictions, and this book has been considered a masterpiece in Bulgaria since it was first published in 1967, I believe. And um, and it's so multi-layered because while she is presenting this historical fiction based on a real power struggle between brothers after their sultan father dies, and Jem becoming a pawn for the powers of Europe, namely the Vatican and Venice, trying to stem the spread of the Ottoman Empire. Um, Mutafchieva is also, explaining this gay relationship between the Sadi, the poet, who is, I was just reading a section from his journals at this stage, and Jem, but also, really kind of identifying what we in the West think of the East-West divide today. And those lines were drawn out in this era of history. And so, and then Mutafchieva is also speaking to what it meant as Bulgarians in the late 60s, kind of being this other from Europe, and the history there from Russian involvement in the country and the kind of Western Europe's perspective.
I found it interesting how she's apparently sticks so close to the historical happenings, but the beating heart of the book is a completely invented character, almost based on a whole other poet who didn't exist at the time with Sadi. It's really interesting. And for it to come from the 60s and feature a queer character is also really great. But so then from the 60s, how did it end up with Sandorf, and why now?
So my partner in this, Ivan Sursin, who started Sandorf about 15 years ago in Zagreb, where he lives, published The Case of Jem in Croatian. And when we were talking about books to do, this was very high on his list. He thought it was well overdue to be translated to English. It is, in our approximation, a genuine globe part. It should be part of the global 20th century canon. And I am happy to report that after, as a result of this edition of it, which Angela did such an amazing job translating, it's been reprinted in Bulgaria, and it's been being retranslated or translated across Europe. And I think it is getting its due for, being recognized as a truly subversive novel. And that it's speaking to something that is, much more than the surface story of a power struggle, like a book of Ottoman court intrigue. It's a much more than that. In fact, I mean, it's considered the first queer Bulgarian novel within Bulgarian literary circles.
Yeah, and it was a great one, and it's like an unsympathetic queer novel too. That's also so very human. So thank you so much for bringing this to us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm gonna hand things over to James.
Well, I think it was fate that I be the one to introduce you to Melvill by Rodrigo Fresán, translated by Will Vanderhyden from Open Letter Press, because I'm sporting this Melvillian beard, which I've been waiting years to be able to have a reason to do that. So maybe we could get to hear a brief piece from the book.
Well, hello, Rodrigo from Barcelona here. Pleasure and a privilege being here. Very happy. Very thankful to Chad and Keija for publishing this book as my other books. And I have a counter proposal to do about me reading, because as I once told Laurie, reading yourself is as much fun as dancing with your own sister, And so what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to read the first sentence, and then Will Vanderhyden, who did for me a brilliant translation, I think he's around, can take it from there. After all, he's the author of the book in English. I mean, I didn't write this book. I wrote the Spanish one, but this is Will wrote it. So I'm going to read just the first. Is Will around? I'm curious.
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read just the first sentence, and then you take it from there, Will. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yes. And with sleepiness comes dreams, the unforgettable and enduring dreams of the sleepless.
The best dreams, because unlike sleeping dreams, the ones to recount later to convince ourselves that in that way we'll preserve them, when the truth is that we're doing anything but remembering, they're scattered and impossible to reassemble pieces. They don't settle for merely being the story of the dream in the imprecise and confused and forgetful moment of waking, so close yet so far away, dreaming and being dreamed. Dreams of striking density that increasingly become solider and more desirable than everything I live in my waking life. Dreams that are the place where ghosts choose to reveal their existence, the dwelling place where all our dead are still alive, and to which every so often they invite us to come and listen to them, making us feel, upon opening our eyes, that they've communicated something paradoxically vital for our existence on this side of things. At my side, beside me, everywhere, in the air almost like smoke signals, suspended like warm breath in the cold of winter, the words of the dead, the words dictated by the dead, are taking place and finding a voice. I dream that I write them. I dream that I write. I write with the permissive authority of dreams, which, in truth, is far closer than we want to believe to the ever-changing structure of our existences, whose only iron and inoxidizable law is that of constant and elastic change, beginning and ending and beginning again and again, sometimes on the same voyage or in the same day. What we do is nothing more than live rewriting, truly, the fictions of our real lives. Lives that only attain the precision of a useful or, at least, reliable design with the immovable perspective of death, that finale that doesn't allow for final corrections or alternate versions, and off of which there, in death, they live on. Lives in which the only thing that absolutely lasts is absolute death. There, the merciful dictatorship of the dead who notice us so that we notice them, asking ourselves and asking them during one of those increasingly popular seances what they would think of this or that, or what they would have done in a given situation, and whom we sometimes try to forget, only to realize that they won't forget us, and all they do is remind us that we'll never be able to forget them.
Thank you for that, Will. So of course, so I could preface how much I like this novel by saying I'm going to open my drink with my white whale bottle opener here.
Great.
So I, of
well,
course,
you have whales all over the place.
I do, yeah. I was going to read this no matter what, but I was very pleased to find when I read it that even if you knew nothing about Herman Melvill or his mercurial father, Alan, it's still a great bit of storytelling. Nonetheless, it is, well, your work has always been filled with allusion and reference to all kinds of other works.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is almost entirely that in one sense. I mean, in fact, one could almost say it's as much a bit of literary biography or criticism as it is a piece of fiction. And I wondered if did you approach it that way? Did you approach it just as a piece of fiction? Did you approach it as just, I have thoughts about Melvill? What was your balance there?
Well, I was always intrigued and admired by Melvill, and I think that all his books, I really like Pierre, which is a book that it's not very well read or known, but I always thought that Moby Dick is one of those artifacts, that contain everything that went before it and sort of predicts or anticipates everything that is going to come later. So it was sort of fascinating for me as some sort of handbook. Well, really, the other thing I really wanted to write since the beginning, when I decided I want to be a writer, and I'm talking about when I was 5 years old, I always wanted to write a vampire ghost story, and this novel is like something like that in a way. And finally, when I read on a Melvill biography, a very short paragraph about his father crossing the frozen Hudson, that sort of fascinated me. In fact, at the beginning, my idea was just to write the whole book. It was going to take place with this man desperately trying to go back home and crossing the frozen Hudson. But I really like all those sort of things and coalesces in this book finally.
See, I guess my next question is really for the publishers. We've talked about how significant it is that it's these smaller independent presses that are willing to take chances on risky books. But another thing they do is commit not just to one book by an author, but to multiple books. This at Open Letter, this is part of a slew of Fresán titles. And I wonder if you could tell us, like, how does this book fit into that oeuvre?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. First of all, thanks, James, and thanks everyone for all the judges for selecting Melvill and for having this and hosting this all very, very wonderful evening. What's interesting about this is one of only 2 books by Rodrigo that's under 600 pages that we published and or have signed on. So we did do Bottom of the Sky, which is a very science fiction inflected book that came out some years ago and kind of in the middle of the trilogy, which is what I think at this moment in time in addition to Melvill, Rodrigo's most known for in English. And that's the invented part, the dreamed part, and the remembered part. Now, all of those kind of deal with like the idea of like, where does fiction come from? Where do these ideas come from? And then ends with picking up a thread of like a father-son relationship and like what gets passed along. And Melvill really fits into that as like an amazing coda where you don't have to read the trilogy. And like you said, you don't necessarily need to know Melvill, but it does have a lot to do with like, where do stories come from? Like what is this inspiration? Where did Moby Dick like appear out of nowhere from? And the idea of Alan telling Herman all these like wild, elaborate, like crazy stories about essentially a vampire is such a fun image and fun moment in the book, but also is like really cool to like kind of tie it back into these themes that came before. So it sort of works perfectly where it is situated. And now we have two 800-page books coming next. So for those of you who are like too short,
Yep.
gotcha.
But I have a very good news for you, Chad. I just received today my new book, and look at this.
Look at that's so small.
Give your wrists a break.
Yeah, exactly. Unbelievable, man.
Yeah.
That's great. You can just package that in with the 800-page novel. Nobody will even know.
Slip it in. No big deal.
Well, thank you for that. I think I'm going to kick it over to Dorian now to introduce us to another title.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Rodrigo, that reference to Pierre made me think that dancing with your sister might actually be high praise. So
yeah, it's true.
I don't know. You maybe need to rethink that one. Anyway,
I know, it's true. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So if it's fate for James to introduce Melvill, then I guess I have to say it's beshert for me to introduce this book, To and Fro, by Leah Hager Cohen, published by Bellevue Literary Press. I have to show both sides of the book. I won't say front or back because we have here we have to, and here we have fro, and you can read to the middle and then go to fro or the other way around. So that's one of the fascinating things about it. So I assume that Leah, you'll be giving us a reading. Maybe you want Erica to do it. I don't know, but we're excited to hear a little snippet from the book.
Hi, thank you. I'm really moved to be in company with all of you tonight. And yeah, I'm going to read a little bit. This is a scene where Anna May is 12 years old. She's suddenly failing English because for reasons that she can't or won't articulate, she is refusing to do the creative writing assignment. Her linguist mother and Anna May herself have been called into school to meet with the teacher, Mrs. Altschuler. And Anna May keeps kind of dissociating during this meeting. So the teacher says, Anna May, Mom has taken off work to be here today. I know. It actually wasn't true. Her mother didn't go to the language lab on Wednesdays. Pretending was easier than explaining, but it made her feel even more that they were actors in a play, speaking their lines, going through their artificial motions. She studied the 60 window panes. If only one of them had blue sky instead of snow, blue sky with little white butterflies, she'd pointed out to her mother and Mrs. Altschuler. See, there's a hole in the backdrop. There really is another world beyond this one. They'd look and gasp and clutch their throats. Oh, Anna May, you were right. Now we understand what you've been trying to say all along. You really are a very special girl. So, Mrs. Altschuler was saying, we can all come up with a plan for you to get your work done. Agreed? What could Anna May do but drift away? Float out of her body toward the windows with their dozens of panes, pass through them into the ether, full of tinky little snowflakes swirling around like Escher animals eating one another's tails, soar beyond them into the seen and unseen city, fly above the streets burdened with lumbering buses and trucks and cars, notice everything. Phlegm spat on sidewalks, men in stilettos and long fur coats, halal stands, yellow-eyed fish on beds of ice. scraggly trees inside wrought iron wickets, uniformed schoolgirls with gold hoop earrings, figures sleeping on cardboard, old women wheeling their laundry and lapdogs and folding shopping carts. It wasn't that she didn't love this world. Anime. What? It was that she knew it wasn't everything. Maybe Mrs. Altschuler had the same app as her mother. Now she seemed to be breathing mindfully too. Sorry, said Anna May. Perhaps she shouldn't have been born a person.
Thank you so much. I have a long question and a short question. Which do you guys want first?
Erica should choose.
Okay, Erica, you can choose.
I have to make sure I can unmute myself. Let's take the long question first.
All right, cool. Okay. So I wanted to point out or just reference 3 points in this novel. One in Fro, where Anna May, who we just heard about, she's thinking about her what her dance teacher once told her about how dancing is like listening for something that isn't there. So that's one of them. The second is when a rabbi calls the white space in the Talmud the space of interpretation. And the third, which is in 2, is when a character called Atla tells the narrator that messengers don't have to understand their message. And maybe we could add a fourth one, which was in the scene that you just read, where she's looking at that, she's thinking about this absence, there's another world behind it kind of thing, in that scene. So and I put these together, and there's lots of that I could have chosen, because they're all about how places where absence is not nothing, but is something. It's like where meaning gets made. And so I guess the question is, like, how much were you thinking about absence when you wrote this book? Because it's one of the big absences is an ending. Like, it doesn't sort of end, right? Like, you read the thing and it's sort of to the end, but then you immediately can switch to the next one, and it's this sort of Escher-like thing of like you never stop. So absence, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I wasn't thinking about absence at all, because to me it didn't feel like absence ever. The ineffable doesn't feel like a void. It just feels like it's difficult to articulate or touch or paint a picture of. And so I think one thing I struggled with in working on writing this book was, as my agent actually put it to me, if you could only make what is spiritually obvious to you more palpable for readers. Yeah.
I mean, that's such a great answer. It's such a philosophic answer, because it's a very philosophic book, I think, but it's also such a tangible book. So I think that, your agent should feel assuaged. I think you succeeded in that. The short question is for both of you. And it's for Leah, it's a practical one about, like, did you write 2 first? Did you write Fro first? Did you write them both at the same time? I'm not sure how that would work, but you're the writer. And Erica, in terms of being the publisher, like, just practically speaking, was it hard to make this book, like, with its distinctive setup?
All right, Erica, I'm going to go first and speak really quickly, because I hope you'll tell the story of what happened when you saw with your X-ray vision into the soul of the book. So I started writing 2, having no idea there was a Fro. I hit the wall, gave up in misery. A few months later, started writing again. It happened to be that I was writing Fro. And after a bit, I saw that these 2 stories were kind of one. Erica.
Well, Leah, you've taken me to a longer story to a shorter question that I'm going to try to shorten. I was going to answer it in practical terms, because in practical terms, making this into a physical book was a challenge that was really fun. It was like working through a puzzle, but not understanding whether the solutions were correct until after we had gone a step beyond and had to pull back. So I don't know how understandable that is. But I think what Leah is talking about is that the manuscript arrived in my inbox in a different form. And it was, is this what you wanted me to describe, Leah? And both of the stories were interwoven directly. So you'd go through a scene with one character, and then the other character would step in, and it would repeat. And I kept feeling like the writing was so beautiful, but it kept interrupting itself, and it didn't feel right to me. So I got in touch with Leah's agent and said, this is gorgeously written, but this narrativus interruptus is driving me nuts. Can we pull it apart and make two narratives that meet in the middle? And the agent said to me, that's just incredible, because that's how this book was originally written. And we transformed it through the submission process. Is that accurate, Leah?
Yes.
So the book outed itself to me.
That is a great story. Score one for Bellevue Press. Well done. So I'm going to turn it to Rebecca for our last but not least title of the evening.
Yeah. Finally, I'm so thrilled to present Lesser Ruins by Mark Haber and published by Coffeehouse Press. And joining us this evening is author Mark Haber, and he's also the director of marketing for Coffeehouse, along with Lauren Graveling, Coffeehouse's director of publicity. And Mark, would you like to read a passage for us?
Yeah, sure. So I've read this one passage for a couple events, so I thought I would do something different. And I think I'm the only reader tonight that's actually going to read, which I thought was the assignment, about dance music. So you all failed, but I'm going to carry through with the assignment of reading about electronic house music. This is just a small excerpt, kind of a digression, where the author is talking about or meditating on the cell phone and the long voicemails that his son leaves. And the chirper of the phone once again removes me from these reveries, the coffee no longer warm, the tangle of pages gaping like discarded relics. And I'm certain the chirp is notifying me of another voicemail, so I'm concerned with the state of my mind, meaning my well-being. And there were no phones in Montaigne's life, I'm reminded, hence no voicemails, hence no intrusions on long swaths of undisturbed time. And I wonder if it's Marcel, because Marcel's voicemails are extraordinary, some lasting well over 10 minutes, where Marcel, accompanied by the distant clamor of his roommates, dispenses muddled soliloquies on the culture of dance music and turntablism, as well as the vibrant tenacity of dub. Months ago, he left his longest message yet, the message solely concerned with the ideal length of a house song, how the length of a house song was the first requirement of a serious house track, and a serious house track could be no less than 5 minutes, he asserted, because a serious house track lasting less than 5 minutes was impossible to take seriously, since it didn't take itself or the tropes and traditions of house music seriously. And no self-respecting dance song is less than 5 minutes, he said. It's impossible, because it's the repetition that creates a good dance song. And what can be repeated in the span of 3 to 4 minutes? Nothing, he answered. Not a thing, he continued, because the perfect length, the ideal length, the sweet spot of a good house track must be between 7 and 11 minutes. And a track less than 5 minutes, I won't bother listening to, because a dance track less than 5 minutes refuses to take itself seriously, at least in observing the custom of a traditional house song. Because house music, he went on, is the practice and the celebration of repetition, finding a hook, a melody, a powerful piano chord, and writing one or all three until bliss is attained. He actually used those words, until bliss is attained. And I remember rolling my eyes as he continued raving about the ideal length of a dance song. Still no idea why he'd left the message. 7 to 11 minutes, he continued, the sweet spot of a respectable house track, adding flourishes along the way, small incremental touches, muted bass lines, hi-hats, hand claps, faux congas, and more. So the song isn't just about melody and movement, which is necessary, but the journey too. I don't know. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Mark. That's a perfect example of kind of like the meandering divergences that our character gets into. One of the things we're most impressed with is the unusual form of this novel. It's essentially three 100-page paragraphs. It's so hilarious about grief and distraction, and it's filled with these serpentine sentences like the examples that you've given tonight. They wander as the writer attempts to finish his book. The form perfectly mirrors the content. And talk to us a little bit about how you arrived on this.
Yeah, well, I know this, an author, great question, thank you, mentioned earlier about a comma interrupting the thought in the writing. And I think that's how it is with me, where I think a lot of readers look at it and they're daunted rightfully by pages of unbroken text. And I find on the writer side that it's hard for me to actually break it up. And so once I have the voice and I kind of see where this digression and this meandering kind of process is going, it felt like it would be kind of cruel or an injustice to his ideas, the narrator's ideas, to kind of cut it and stop it. And I wanted the book, I kept thinking about the word ecstatic. I wanted to be ecstatic, even though it's riddled with grief and it's a sad book as well. I wanted to feel that excitement of language and storytelling. So it's very interior, but at the same time, it kind of goes all over the place. Yeah, and I don't think I intended initially for it to be three broken paragraphs, but the form kind of found itself as I wrote, really probably towards the end.
Nice. And my next question for Mark and Laura both, you guys both spent a lot of years as booksellers, and now you're both at Coffee House Press. And what are some of the most surprising things you've learned about the book industry, moving from bookstore to publishing house? And how has your experience bookselling kind of informed your mission at Coffee House Press so far?
Oh, wow, that is such a hard question. Turn it over to Laura.
I was just going to say, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good question. I think it feels very strange. It feels like being on sort of the other side of the looking glass a bit. I think especially, one of my jobs at Brazos, I was doing a lot of book buying. And now one of my jobs here is preparing the book's metadata for buyers to look at. And so I do hold a lot of, I've noticed, very strong opinions and quirks on the way it should be formatted in Edelweiss and like stuff like that. So I think there are specific things like that, but yeah, they're freakishly similar, I'd say. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
I think yeah, they're very similar in a way, they're very adjacent, but book selling to me was the hours were harder, but it was an easier job in that the person comes into the bookstore and they want something. Where on the publisher side, you've got to try and get people's attention. You don't know if you can get their attention or not. So it felt like book selling was people coming in, the interest was already there. They're there to ask about a book or buy one. And I think all of the publishers can agree that it's harder and harder to kind of get people's attention and keep it. So
Well, I know we're all thrilled to be putting Lesser Ruins in front of our customers who are coming in with that interest. Well, thank you guys so much. Lori, should I turn it back over to you?
Yeah, I'm just going to say good night. I hope that I'm not saying good morning to Rodrigo and to Jan and people that it's already so late. I just want to express my appreciation, and it's heartfelt for everything that the publishers, the authors, and the translators do each and every day. It's hard work, and I'm sure sometimes it feels like thankless work, but you enrich our lives to such a huge extent. And I speak for myself, and I think I speak for the judges too. We are so grateful, and we are honored that you spent a little bit of time with us this evening. So thank you, and don't go changing. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Translators, writers, thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.